It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm David Hooper. This is the show where I talk about how to build a big audience, how to attract people to your podcast, how to spread your message, how to make money with your message. If you have not subscribed yet, bigpodcast.com/subscribe will allow you to do that. That way you will never miss an episode. On this episode, speaking of episodes, we're going to talk about 30 podcast episodes in 30 days, also known as NaPodPoMo. It stands for National Podcast Post Month. You probably heard of National Novel Writing Month. 50,000 words in 30 days. NaPodPoMo is the podcast equivalent. 30 episodes in 30 days. It happens every November. I've done it several times, and if you go to that URL that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, bigpodcast.com/subscribe, you can see 3 different podcasts from 3 different NaPodPoMos. One of them is a jumpstart that will help you jumpstart your podcast, get it back on track. The other, podcast interviewing school, that will teach you how to be a better podcast interviewer. I go through a step-by-step process, 30 days of how to become a better interviewer. And the other 30-day solo podcast challenge, that will really come in handy for NaPodPoMo. You can go through it day by day as you go through NaPodPoMo, should you decide to do this. And I highly encourage you to. NaPodPoMo, or really just recording every day. Let's talk about what you can get from that. You will become more confident as a host. You will clarify your message because you'll be talking about it again and again and again. You'll see what works, what doesn't. I encourage you to edit your podcast episodes in NaPodPoMo, but maybe you want to do it without editing. And I think that can be a very valuable tool because it gets you very present. Nobody has to hear this. This is for you. You know, I've got a podcast like that. It's called Big Podcast Daily. That was another project that started during NaPodPoMo. And all I do is I hit record. I read things. I've got some episode prep. You can listen to it. Just look up Big Podcast Daily. It's called The Sausage Factory. It'll pop up. You can hear me read things. And I answer questions. And I do that via a program called Poddex, which I've got the app. That's why I call it a program. I've also got the Dex. You may be familiar with this, poddex.com. It's random questions. You can get random questions anywhere. If you don't want to invest in the Poddex, go to Table Topics by Toastmasters. Just search for it. Table Topics questions. All those things will come up. When you do something again and again, you become a better host as far as your reading, your delivery, but also getting clear on how to deliver that message if you're talking about the same thing. And most podcasters do. You've got a topic and you hit it again and again and again in different ways. This one, it's marketing for podcasters. It allows you to test a new idea. Those 3 podcasts that I mentioned, that was me testing an idea. I wanted to see how it worked. I wanted to get clarity on it. I wanted to give you something that was very specific because I get questions. Hey, how can I become a better host? Well, here's what you do. How can I do a solo podcast? Here's what you do. How can I become a better interviewer? Here's what you do. I've got something for you, and it goes deep. You do the work once, and you can use it again and again and again, rather than going through 30 days of instruction for each individual person who emails you. And if you edit, as I mentioned, you will get better at editing. I've got a woman I work with, Zita Christian. I've talked about her before, the oldest podcaster that I know, the oldest new podcaster that I know. She got into it late, in her late 60s. She's in her 70s now. She told me a story about the first time she edited a podcast episode. It was taking her hours. I don't remember, 4 hours? I don't think it was 8 hours. But it was longer than you would have wanted to. Let's say that. And then she said she got it down to 2 hours, and then she got it down to under an hour. The more you do something, the better you get at it. The other thing I love about NaPodPoMo is it allows you to take risks. You could go right now to anchor.fm, set up a brand new podcast. You could do it as a character. You could do it anonymously. I don't talk about the Sausage Factory that much. I might mention it here or there, just as an example of what you can do with your podcast, but it's not something I'm out there promoting. And it allows me to take risk. The most recent episode, I was going off the cuff, talking about NaPodPoMo. And then I got into the Pod Deck's relationship deck cards. It was asking me questions about my relationship. You know, it's a pretty personal thing. That is a risk. Some people would not have wanted to answer those questions. Good thing not a lot of people are hearing that. At least if you don't want them to hear it. If you want them to hear it, well, you got to get out there and promote. And that's what we talk about here on this podcast. NaPodPoMo has no rules, not for the type of podcast that you do anyway. You can do any type of podcast that you want. And one of the things that I like about it, and one of the reasons to get involved with it right now, is there's a great community that comes with it. If you search for NaPodPoMo on Facebook, and I'm going to spell this out for you, NaPodPoMo. Search for it on Facebook. You will find a Facebook group there full of people who are doing the same thing that you are, 30 episodes in 30 days. You're going to learn from them. You'll see what they're doing. You'll be inspired by them. You'll get good ideas on how to edit, good ideas how to quickly come up with content ideas. It's a great community, and that comes with this program. And I'm saying it like it costs something. It doesn't cost you a thing. In fact, if you got a phone, smartphone, if you got the Anchor app, you don't have to get any additional equipment, and it's not going to cost you a thing to host it. What I see as the big benefit of this is not to have the best sounding podcast, but it's to come up with creative content, to get consistent at your podcasting, and to work with what you have right now, which chances are a smartphone and an idea. So work with that. It does not have to be perfect. If you want to jump in on podcasting in general, maybe try a new podcasting idea, this is the best place to do it. And like I said, do it with Anchor. You could have a podcast up via Anchor in 10 minutes. No lie. You could log in, record the podcast, and have it available to the world in 10 minutes. It's a double-edged sword. It's kind of annoying because there's a lot of crappy podcasts that we've got to swim through to find something really great. But again, who cares if people listen to your NaPodPoMo podcast? Who cares? Look at the opportunity as I'm going to get in there, I'm going to become a better host, and I'm going to vet this idea that I've got. So when I do edit, when I do record it well, when I do really put time into it, I'm going to have more clarification and more of an idea of what I want that podcast to sound like than I do right now. That's what it's about. 30 days from now, you could be in a better position than you are as far as your hosting, as far as your idea, as far as your ability to get in and quickly edit. Let me give you some help and let me give you some ideas. I mentioned the 30-day solo podcast challenge. That is available at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've got a 30-day process. And if you want to work with me day by day, I will tell you what to talk about on your solo podcast. So in 30 days from now, you will be a better solo podcast host. If you want to be like me and do something like Big Podcast Daily, that's what I call the sausage factory format. This will also make you a better host. And this is what it is. You read something, that's the first part of the episode. You could read maybe 2 or 3 minutes, under 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. You could read the newspaper. You could read something online. You could read the horoscope. I don't care. But get better at reading, because that comes in handy when somebody hands you a bio and you've got to introduce somebody. It comes in handy when an advertiser gives you a very specific type of copy and specific wording that he wants you to read on your podcast. It is good to be able to read and make it sound natural. The second part of this format is answering questions. I talked about Pod Decks, the Pod Decks app, or you can go to poddecks.com, PODDECKS.com, or you can search Table Topics Questions and you answer one of those questions. That is it. You pick up a card or press a button and a screen pops up with a question on it. You answer that question without any kind of preparation. I'll give you an example. I mentioned the relationship deck that I was pulling from. It's a brand new deck. It just came out. I don't have that deck, but there's a preview so I could see what was in it. And one of the questions was, do you believe in public displays of affection? Another one of the questions, what is a deal breaker for you in a relationship? You got thoughts on that? Go for it. Hit that tape, read the question, answer the question. And then reading before that, that is the sausage factory format. If you've got questions, reach out to me, bigpodcast.com. That's where I live. And bigpodcast.com/subscribe to get that 30-day solo podcast challenge. Let me know what I can do for you to help you build a big podcast, to help you become a better host, get people to your podcast, make more money with your podcast. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next episode.